The bardic tradition of magic would place a bard as being much higher and more fearsome than a magician. A magician might curse you. That might make your hens lay funny, or you might have a child born with a club foot. If a bard were to place not a curse upon you, but a satire, then that could destroy you. If it was a clever satire, it might not just destroy you in the eyes of your associates. It would destroy you in the eyes of your family. It would destroy you in your own eyes. And if it was a finely worded and clever satire that might survive and be remembered for decades, even centuries, then years after you were dead, people still might be reading it and laughing at you and your wretchedness and your absurdity. Writers and people who had command of words were respected and feared as people who manipulated magic. In latter times, I think that artists and writers have allowed themselves to be sold down the river. They have accepted the prevailing belief that art and writing are merely forms of entertainment. They're not seen as transformative forces that can change a human being, that can change a society. They are seen as simple entertainment, things with which we can fill 20 minutes, half an hour while we're waiting to die. It is not the job of artists to give the audience what the audience want. If the audience knew what they needed, then they wouldn't be the audience. They would be the artists. It is the job of artists to give the audience what they need. My career as a magician continues to evolve. Since I, to a certain degree, believe art and magic to be interchangeable, it has seemed only natural that art should be the means by which I express magical ideas. This has found its way into my prose writing, in works such as Voice of the Fire, and probably most visibly has found its way into the performance pieces that I've done at various locations over the past 8 years. Beautiful little psychedelic artifacts in their own right, which actually capture the kind of narrative journey that we've tried to take the readers on as part of these performances, to overwhelm the sensibilities of the audience, to tip them over into a kind of psychedelic state where we can hopefully actually change their consciousness and direct it to different places, different levels, hopefully into new and hopefully magical spaces. When we are doing the will of our true self, we are inevitably doing the will of the universe. In magic, these are seen as indistinguishable. That every human soul is in fact one human soul. It is the soul of the universe itself, and as long as you are doing the will of the universe, then it is impossible to do anything wrong. Murder is something which is intricately connected with society in a number of ways. And with From Hell, what we wanted to do was not so much to create a whodunit as to create something which asked what happened, where we could trace all of these complex threads from the heart of the murder and see what kind of areas they led us into. Areas of history, occultism, mythology, architecture, social considerations. All of these played a part upon shaping the world that the crimes happened in. And it seemed to me to be important to investigate all of those possibilities, to try and create a map of this event that included all of those strange foreign areas that aren't generally included when one considers a murder. I was not concerned with who done it. I was concerned with what happened. I was concerned with the why done it aspects of the thing. The one place in which gods and demons inarguably exist is in the human mind, where they are real in all their grandeur and monstrosity. Much of magic, as I understand it, in the Western occult tradition, is the search for the self with a capital S. This is understood as being the great work, as being the gold that alchemists sought, as being the will, the soul, the thing that we have inside us that is behind the intellect, the body, the dreams. The inner dynamo of us, if you like. Now, this is the single most important thing that we can ever attain. The knowledge of our own self. And yet there are a frightening amount of people who seem to have the urge not just to ignore the self, but actually seem to have the urge to obliterate themselves. This is horrific, but you can almost understand the desire to simply wipe out that awareness because it's too much of a responsibility to actually possess such a thing as a soul, such a precious thing. What if you break it? What if you lose it? Mightn't it be best to anesthetize it, to deaden it, to destroy it, to not have to live with the pain of struggling towards it and trying to keep it pure? I think that the way that people immerse themselves in alcohol, in drugs, in television, in any of the addictions that our culture throws up can be seen as a deliberate attempt to destroy any connection between themselves and the responsibility of accepting and owning a higher self and then having to maintain it. Back when I was doing Swamp Thing, which was ostensibly a horror comic, I found that it wasn't really effective to just sort of swamp the readers in horror every issue. You needed to do other things that would alleviate the repetitive qualities of the horror and to make it more than a one-note strip. I decided that what might be useful was to try and link up the elements of fantasy horror from our imaginations, werewolves, vampires, zombies and the like, with real-life horrors. Racism, sexism, pollution, the collapse of the environment, and thus lend these social issues some of the weight that fantasy fiction could offer. Most of us have little to fear from vampires, and yet we live in cultures that are every bit as dangerous, despite the non-existence of terrible supernatural forces. One of the things that I did was a strip in which we explored the erotic possibilities of Swamp Thing. I figured that if you could fill comic book after comic book every month with fights, then